last week, and I guess rock and roll, politics, Cleveland all converging. I got a guy here who's a Cleveland guy who's a Yankees beat writer up in New York for Newsday Sports. So you can follow his journey out on Twitter at eBoland11. If they don't burn his town down this week, well, and even if they do, well, at least they had a parade a couple of weeks ago. Eric, I know before we get to Yankees, I want to give you some Cleveland love because I know you wear that, as all Clevelanders do, as a badge of honor. It must have been nice to have all your friends be that happy. As I tweeted, God loved Cleveland for one day at least, right?
Yeah, it was and it was probably done in the most unexpected way possible. And I think the last time I was on with you, Nestor, it was either right before that series was starting, or maybe it had just started and the Cavs had gotten whacked in the first two games. But once they were down 3-1. I didn't think, and I'm certainly not alone in this, I'm sure, didn't think that they had a chance, and of winning that series.
Well, we all read that script, right? I mean, even when there was a minute left in the game, we felt like Cleveland always loses this game. They're going to lose.
I actually didn't. I was watching the Yankees were finishing up a series in Minneapolis, so I covered that game that afternoon and was in the bar of the Marriott that I was staying at in downtown Minneapolis watching that game, and I didn't actually feel that they were going to win that game until after LeBron went down the lane and got hammered on his way, but had two free throws with 11 seconds left or whatever it was. But even after Irving hit the three-pointer, I was still in my mind constructing ways that they were going to, get forced into overtime and then lose in some heartbreaking way there. So when they actually did win, it was almost more of a stunned, wide-open, mouth agape type of a thing than a celebratory thing, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when the Ravens won.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, when the Ravens won in New Orleans, they had 4th and goal from the 1. There was no sense of celebration. It was more like relief, right?
Yeah, I think it's very similar, and I think Clevelanders of a certain age, and I would say probably age 30 or 35 plus, and I'm 42. I think that I think you're just conditioned to expect the worst. Maybe if you're a Clevelander in his early 20s or her early 20s or in teens, because the Cavs have been good most of your life, maybe you weren't anticipating quite the worst thing happening. But I think most of us had a very similar experience watching that game. I know my parents, who are both in their mid-70s, had it as well. You really didn't think it was going to happen almost until the buzzer sounded.
Did you buy your mom and dad like a Cavs championship hat or a shirt? I've asked every Clevelander, like, how long does it take to get the swag and to be sporting the swag? Did you have like a Cavs hat on in the press box the next night at the Yankees game or no?
No.
No. Okay.
I do. I try to maintain a level of professionalism in the press box.
Well, maybe that's why I'm not in the press box anymore, because I brag when my team wins. We don't win much. If you're from Cleveland, you're allowed to brag a little bit, man. All right, so you've been...
there were plenty of people that offered, congratulations, and my standard line is, yes, they could not have done it without me.
Right, of course, because you left. Eric Boland joining us here, Yankees beat writer. All right, so here come the Orioles, and here come the trade rumors and the fire sale and all that. And I guess as we're getting up on it now, the Red Sox improved their team last week. The Orioles, if you gave me $1 right now and said bet it on one of these teams, I would bet it on the Red Sox until further notice, and I've seen the Orioles pitch. I've also seen the Yankees act here of recent times, and you've watched it all year long. What's your prescription on this? Is there a sell-off in your mind going to happen for the Yankees in the next 10 days?
Based on what we've seen, I would have to lean towards no, Nestor, and I think it has to do with the fact that as long as this team is treading water the way they are, which is just hovering around that 500 mark, a game above, at 500, maybe dipping to 2 or 3 below. It hasn't gotten much worse than that since they rebounded from the 9-17 start. That ownership and management just is not going to give Brian Cashman the go-ahead to sell off marketable pieces, unless, of course, somebody comes forward and just offers the farm, so to speak, for a guy like Andrew Miller or Aroldis Chapman. But it's just all the indications that I've gotten, and I do get a kick just to do as caveat or a sidebar to this, that the breathless reporting sometimes that takes place where somebody says sources Yankees will listen at the trade deadline. Well, what general manager doesn't listen? And Brian Cashman on the record will tell you that my job as a general manager is to listen. So I just want to get that out of the way, because you see stuff like that every few days or every week or whatever, and it passes off as breaking news, and it's not breaking news. But the reality is ownership doesn't want to raise the white flag on the season. And so unless this team is 8, 10, 12 games under 500, I don't believe, and obviously Hal Steinbrenner can change his mind, and Randy Levine, the team president, can encourage Hal to change his mind, but neither seem inclined at this point to want to give the okay to some kind of a sell-off, as long as they believe that there is some kind of a path to the postseason for this team. And if the team's record stays around that 500 mark, I think that's what their belief is, then you're not going to see some kind of a mass sell-off. Now, look, if the Orioles, come into town and sweep the Yankees, and the Giants, who are going to be coming into town after that, they sweep the Yankees, and suddenly they've got a 7-game losing streak or whatever, maybe that would be the thing that would push management to think differently. But that's not the way the Yankees, for the most part, have played this year. They've been a below average to occasionally above average team. And that's what 500 teams are, and that's what the Yankees have been for the last 2 months, really, and that's what they are now.
Eric Bowen covering all things Yankees for Newsday up in New York. Of course, the Orioles there for 4 games this week, and the Yankees in some sense of turmoil. I mean, there's always sort of turmoil and controversy sort of swirling around them. But the one thing that Cashman's never been allowed to do is deal this way, right? Trying to bring in prospects. They haven't done this in 20 years, 22 years, whatever the number has been since they've kind of been out of it as a seller. This would be an interesting time to see what some of these guys would fetch in the open market, and then how they could go out in the open market and spend more money. It's never about a money dump with them as it is in other places. This really would be about what can you get for Andrew Miller? What can you get at this point for Chapman if you were to deal them off? And I don't think making 1 or 2 little deals, that doesn't do anything for me. Either have a whole sell-off or have a whole we're going to stay all in and try to track down the Yankees, or excuse me, the Red Sox and the Orioles and the Blue Jays. Do you see them tinkering at all? And I guess the bigger question is, who's really running this? I mean, who really gets to call the shot at the end of the day as to what they do when there are 3 names circulating here? In the old days, it was just the old guy from Cleveland, from your hometown in Steinbrenner. Whatever he wanted, he kind of got. It doesn't work that way anymore with the Yankees, right?
Well, it's not nearly as complex as that. I mean, Brian Cashman has autonomy over baseball deals. He doesn't have Randy Levine in his ear telling him to, here, trade this minor leaguer or that minor leaguer, the way George Steinbrenner would as you mentioned, up until the very, end of Steinbrenner's life when Cashman did have that autonomy. But, look, he does answer to the owner of the team, and I think that's true for any general manager. It's really, again, it's a matter of him getting the green light to start to sell off some of those parts that you mentioned. And there's a few other, Carlos Beltran would be a guy that other teams that need a batter are interested in. Brett Gardner potentially would be a guy that people would be interested in. But they need to be bad enough for them to for ownership to give that go ahead. So it's not like when Cashman wants to make a deal that he's got to go through several layers of bureaucracy. Obviously, things need to be cleared with the club owner, Hal Steinbrenner. But it really is, again, a matter of what this team's record looks like. And people that expect something to happen now, where else is something happening at this point 3-4 weeks in advance of the trade deadline? So I know that the inclination is that people want to see something buy or sell be determined right at this very instant, but that's not really determined for any team at this point, other than ones who are 20, 25 games under 500. But as you know, Nestor, with this additional wild card that came in a few years ago, a lot more teams feel that they're in it when maybe they really aren't. But their records suggest that they are, and so things come down to the deadline, meaning the final hours before. It used to be July 31st, now August 1st this year. Comes down really to the hours and days right before that, and I think the Yankees are going to be in that boat.
Yeah, I guess in your mind you're thinking, well, if we get into the wild card and we have one game, we have Tanaka, we'd have a chance, right? Well, at least the Orioles, at least for this series, are skipping Tanaka. And there's been a lot of that going on with the Orioles, where the other team's best pitcher just slides in the night before they come to town or whatever. For the rest of this rotation, we have our own problems with the Orioles at this point, trying to figure out who's at the bottom of the rotation. That's been that's been a concern for the Yankees as well. I mean, they're going to give the ball to Eovaldi. They're going to give the ball to Nova. They're going to give the ball to Pineda, no matter how bad they are at this point, because they really don't have other options at this point.
They don't have any other options. I mean, there's a couple of guys, Luis Sessa and Chad Green, who are in the minor leagues, and we've seen Green a few times this year, and he's been good in a start. He was average in a start, and he was really bad in a start. So the Yankees aren't in a position, or they don't feel they're in a position just to turn over a rotation spot to him. And Eovaldi, just taking him as one example, who was skipped a turn at the end of the first half of the season, he's 26 years old, so I don't know if it's an arm that you necessarily give up on, a guy that throws 98, 99 as he does. A lot of fans want him just pulled from the rotation or traded or banished to the minor leagues, whatever. And the guy they want him to replace him, Chad Green, is a rookie, is 25 years old. So there's only 1 year different there. People forget Eovaldi came up really as a 21-year-old. But look, to me, and I wrote this recently in Newsday, the biggest disappointment of the first half for the Yankees wasn't the offense, as disappointing as it was. It was the starting rotation, because the feeling around the Yankees during spring training was, if our rotation stays healthy, this can be a real strength of the team. Well, the rotation has stayed healthy, and it's been inconsistent, bordering on train wreck at times, to the point where you have 3 of the 5 starters have 5+ ERAs. And it seems like CC Sabathia, his last 5 starts, is headed in that direction after what was a terrific start to the year. And Masahiro Tanaka, who you mentioned, Baltimore is going to miss this series, even though he's had some struggles when he's gone on regular 4 days rest, still far and away has been the Yankees' best pitcher this season, and it's not even close. So to me, the biggest, not surprise necessarily, but biggest disappointment has been the rotation, because, again, the thought was around the club during the spring was this could be a really good rotation if they stayed healthy. And again, they've been healthy and haven't produced.
Well, I think part of the second half of the year and getting Chapman onto the hill and getting him involved in this thing was going to be, well, if you can get through 6 innings, the back end of the bullpen in games you can win with Betances, Miller, and Chapman, you'd be okay. I guess that's borne itself out. I mean, they are all all-star caliber pitchers. They've all been excellent, much more sturdy than the starting rotation's been, but it hasn't been enough to win games. And certainly the bats have been a disaster for the money for Teixeira and A-Rod. Hey, man, I go back to the Teixeira thing here, Baltimore kid, and I remember how disgruntled everyone here was that the old man here couldn't get a bid in, he wouldn't take the team seriously. I don't know. I mean, in retrospect, you look at all the money the Yankees spent, that was kind of a bad signing. That's one of those signings that we're looking at Chris Davis here and wondering what that's going to look like 3, 4, 5 years down the line. But the Teixeira thing really wasn't a great investment for them, was it?
You know, that's a good question, and the autopsy on that, because so many other things are going around, swirling around this team. You haven't seen a lot of that analysis here, and it is the final year of that $180 million contract. I would say, because you did get one World Series out of it in 2009, and obviously he wasn't the only one that contributed to that 2009 World Series, but I would say that any contract that leads to at least one World Series can't be chalked up as being a bad contract, but it certainly hasn't been as good as what they thought the investment was going to be. The batting average, the slugging, everything else, other than last year, when he had the 30+ home runs, which sort of came out of nowhere, steadily declined from year one on. The one thing that has been consistent, and Yankee fans who have never warmed to Teixeira, because early on in that contract, he had a lot of playoff season disappointment, and he kind of became the poster child for some postseason failures for this team, him along with Nick Swisher, who's, of course, no longer here. He's never gotten credit, though, for how good he is defensively and how many runs he saves over at first base. And so I think that always needs to be added to the mix when evaluating Teixeira. But again, because the numbers have steadily gone down over the course of that 8-year contract, you'd have to say that the Yankees probably didn't get, from their perspective, their money's worth out of that deal. But the very big ornament on top of that tree that can't be discounted is that they did win the 2009 World Series with him at first.
Eric Boland joining us here from Newsday in New York, covering all things Yankees. The Orioles headed to the Bronx, and you make your evenings over there all summer long and watch a lot of teams come through. Where are you on the Orioles as this series begins as a first-place team? And that doesn't happen very often after the All-Star break in this part of the world. But the Red Sox feel like they're coming to get the Orioles, and it doesn't feel like the Orioles have the kind of firepower they're going to need to make the kind of deal to bring in an impact pitcher, which they need. And, of course, the Red Sox made their move last week. How do you feel about the Orioles and their stability over the next 90 days?
I think, Nestor, last time I was on with you, maybe it was a month and a half ago, and you asked me a similar question. I told you I thought that they would stay right there as long as they stayed healthy because, look, the rotation obviously is a problem. It's a concern, and if they're able to make some kind of a deal for a pitcher at the break, then they automatically, similar to the way Toronto took off in the second half of last season, maybe they could be this year's Toronto who takes up. If they're not able to put that kind of a deal together, and you know what they have to offer, certainly a lot better than I do, if they're not able to, I still think that they can hang around for two reasons. They hit the ball. Their lineup is terrific. I'll give you three reasons. Back end of their bullpen, and really their bullpen overall, I think, but the back end has been, if you look at the numbers, almost as devastating as what the Yankees has been this year, and that's pretty good. And the AL East, it's just not, there's no super team there, and this is part of what feeds the Yankees' belief that they're still in it, because they feel they're a winning streak whenever they get, 8 out of 10 or 12 out of 15 or 17 out of 20. They're one of those streaks away from being right back in this thing because there's not that great team in the division. You've got a few teams that have good nucleus and have a good core of players, but they're tremendously flawed teams as well. And so therefore, I think the fact that Boston probably has the best chance to take off, and let's use the Blue Jays again of last year as an example of a team that can, go on a big second half run in the Pomerantz deal. Certainly, puts them in that, capability. But I don't see the Orioles just suddenly tanking and losing 15 out of 20 and disappearing. I think the manager's too good. I think the bullpen's too good, and I think the lineup's too good.
And the defense is pretty decent as well, and that sort of goes unnoticed. Bad pitching, ground balls get eaten up, and they don't become base runners at that point, and that certainly has helped them out since they've gotten Hardy back and Adam Jones back as well from the beginning of the season. Eric Boland joining us here, and if you go to his Twitter, and you can do that at eBoland, that's Boland 11, you will see that you're quite the golf guy. Big weekend at Royal Troon, right? I mean, we're all wondering what happened to Spieth, and certainly Lefty was chasing on the back nine, but it was Stenson that really on Sunday was just brilliant, right?
Oh, it was great to watch, and I'm too. I'm not old enough to remember the 1977 duel in the sun at Turnberry, but I think the comparisons certainly are were well founded with the 77 duel between Nicklaus and Watson, where Watson went 65-65 and Nicklaus went 65-66 and lost by a stroke. What Mickelson and Stenson did yesterday certainly was comparable the way they pulled away and blew away the field in a major tournament, no less. It was great. It was great theater. I think the one thing you are seeing with Spieth and Rory McIlroy and Jason Day and the other core of young players is just how absurd it was when those guys would get one or two majors and people started putting graphics up. Who's going to win more majors, Tiger or Jordan Spieth? After winning, two, or Tiger or Jason Day. I mean, what Tiger Woods did, that run that he had to get the 14 majors was historically good. And it seems like, and I'll put the collective we in the media on this one, go totally nuts and absurdly so when one of these young guys comes up and wins one major or two majors and start making comparisons to Tiger Woods, because you're not going to see that kind of a run for a very, very long time. And you're seeing, even with a guy like Spieth, as good as he is and as well as he putts, how difficult it is to maintain excellence, particularly in the major tournaments. How tough that is to do in professional golf.
Well, and also the conditions that play in with the rain and the wind, and just different different courses. I mean, so many things happen, but the level of competition's ridiculous out on that tour right now.
Yeah, the tour's never been deeper, and these guys come up, the 21-year-olds, 22, 23, they don't fear anyone, and that was one of the things when Tiger was in his prime. When he would charge on the leaderboard, or if he was atop the leaderboard by the weekend, you could almost see a palpable quit take place with the rest of the field. Not to the point where they're laying their clubs down and walking back to the clubhouse, but you could just see everybody wilted under the pressure of Tiger Woods, and it was inevitable that he was going to win. And how many majors did he take a lead into Sunday? Where you knew what was going to happen, and then it ended up happening. You don't see that anymore. And so the younger guys, there's never been a better collection of more younger players playing well on the tour than there is right now.
Well, some would say it makes it a lot more interesting, but it certainly doesn't feed the drama of the big star, right? The question is, do you want a star or do you want a level playing field? I think that's for sports across the board. When the Yankees were just beating everybody's ass, people say, well, it's the Yankees and the Red Sox and everybody else. Now it's the level playing field, and people are saying, hey, what's wrong with the Yankees? Where are they going? So we'll be following them.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think golf's in the best shape it's been in, probably because you do have a good core collection of star players. Probably the best shape that's been in since Tiger was coming up, so to speak.
And a real international feel. Different guys from different parts of the world as well.
Absolutely.
Eric, always great having you on, man. Enjoy your time up there in the Bronx this week. I'm not coming up to join you this week, not even for the afternoon game on Thursday. I'll be watching from here. But it is a great baseball season when we're in first place around here. It certainly made it interesting and made the trading deadline even more interesting for what all of these teams are going to do over the next 10 days.
It should be fascinating to watch. Thanks, Nestor.
Eric, always great having you on. Boland11 is the way to find him. He's the Yankees beat writer out at Newsday Sports. You can follow them at newsday.com as well. You can find me out in the Bio Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear. Our morning newspaper hits your email inbox at 7 a.m. every morning, and that is powered up, of course, by Planet Fitness. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST text service. It's free. It's all powered up by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And don't forget, Dennis Kolatzis will be here driving you home from 3 until 5 on Thursday. I'll be driving you crazy throughout the week, tweeting about the Orioles, waiting for the Ravens to begin, and like everyone else, watching the politics out in the land of Cleve. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports. In Baltimore and WN Ravens about to open training camp next week, and the Orioles potentially in first place for that, but they're going to need to get through a week in New York, in the Bronx. I watched the Yankees play the Red Sox a bunch over the weekend.